A pleasure to meet all at last. Welcome back to Films I'm Willing to Talk About Again. More than 10 years ago now, a certain movie by Guillermo del Toro, hope I pronounced the name right, had come out and pretty much changed the way America has perceived the famous Japanese giant monster cliche known as the kaiju. And if you hadn't watched it yet, then well, you're about to hear it from me, personally speaking. Pacific Rim, released in summer of 2013, was an epic blockbuster about giant robots fighting kaiju to the bitter end. And boy, was it astounding. It was probably one of the best pieces that Del Toro put together, apart from his other works, like when he adapted Hellboy and those famous Dark Horse comics of the same name. And then of course, when he went on to create other works, he certainly began to gain quite a reputation, but it was through this that he actually got to get as big as he possibly could have with modern audiences. Because even after more than 10 years, it still is quite far one of the best American kaiju films. It was certainly a predecessor to the likes of Legendary Studios' own variation of kaiju films known as the MonsterVerse. Yeah, if you remember when I talked about Godzilla 2014, Godzilla Long Live the King, and other things in relation to the MonsterVerse, well, I still do have some other things I probably could talk about, but that won't happen till some other point in time. Anyways though, Pacific Rim stars Charlie Hunnam as a young man known by the name of Raleigh Beckett. The very same Raleigh Beckett who's had quite a past. Especially when in the year 2017, he ended up in a bit of a ruckus and ended up losing a partner of his in a fight against kaiju. He basically worked for a program known as the Jaeger program. And basically, Jaeger, as we know, is simply German for warrior. And in this instance, the Jaeger actually refers to a series of giant robots that were created by the United Nations. A grouping in particular that was able to invest so much money into the program that it eventually ended up turning dry. You see, throughout the years that have passed, ever since the very beginning of the kaiju invasion from a certain area known only to humanity as the Pacific Rim, well, apart from that pretty much being the main significance as to why the title is Pacific Rim, the whole thing about this kaiju invasion was a series of conquerism. Yeah, a series of conquistadors from an unknown origin apparently are sending kaiju out to Earth to cause havoc of all sorts. To cause wreckings and havocs of all sorts. Yeah, seems weird if I say it fast, but that was the generalized idea. And the thing is, it never stops. It never ends no matter which way it goes. So it's up to Raleigh Beckett and company out there at the Jaeger program to stop them. And the way they do so is by getting into their giant robots, having some physical compatibility with a partner of theirs, and the two pilots are able to use two hemispheres of their own brains to fight the monsters at hand. One hemisphere per person, and well, they all get to work. Unfortunately though, it's not as easy as it seems, because while pilot testings originally showed that one brain with both hemispheres wouldn't be enough to suffice, and more so, it can end up hurting or even killing the users at hand. That's why they invested in two pilots, not just one. Sort of like flying an aircraft, except it's much bigger, much heavier, and can pack quite a punch, quite literally. But in this instance, a series of fights would break down, and the Jaegers are all given unique names like Striker, Eureka, Gypsy Danger, and Cherno Alpha. Basically, a representation of each country with their own unique Jaeger warrior by their side, to ensure that the kaiju are kept at bay. It unfortunately comes to terms between Raleigh Beckett and his boss, Stacker Pentecost, a member of the Australian group responsible for organizing the Striker Eureka Jaeger, and even more so with many other Jaegers that have fallen victim to kaiju of all sorts, especially when kaiju, especially within the category ranges of 3 and 4, has certainly become quite a challenge as time went on. It seemed that whoever was making these kaiju were not only stopping at this threat, but they were getting better as time went on. So it was up to them to basically come up with a better solution. But unfortunately, as time went on even further, there eventually came a woman known by the name of Mako from Japan. She apparently comes to them hoping to aid them in the fight. As it turns out, there actually was a backstory that's showcased in the film where her parents have fallen victim to kaiju at some point. Quite a big way to reminisce the Godzilla films, if you ask me. But in any case, compatibility is tested, and even when all this stuff is put together, some disagreements show up, and eventually it comes down to a series of fights that take place near China. Basically, a kaiju known by the name of Otachi was taking down the likes of Crimson Typhoon, China's own Jaeger, as well as Russia's Jaeger, Cherno Alpha. And even after all that has come through, another kaiju known by the name of Leatherback comes through and decimates the two Jaegers. And even though Striker Eureka is ordered to stand down and let it all go together, they try to make their way through, but they're unable to save the two Jaegers and all the pilots involved. Eventually, as luck would have it, even though Striker was able to hold out on their own, barely surviving, Gypsy Danger actually comes back with a new crew in check. And that, of course, is Raleigh and Mako. Apparently the two handle it better than many would have expected, as they were able to beat the crap out of Leatherback, and eventually Otachi would also be forced to fly away. But not before grabbing onto Gypsy and, well, taking off into the skies. But while the Jaeger is able to slice up Otachi, it still has a rough ride back down to Earth, when thankfully, after some controlled thrusts, they are able to land safely, practically unscathed. And so, despite the damages, both Striker and Gypsy both end up getting repaired. And well, as it turns out, they actually come across the Pacific Rim itself and notice a rift opening at the very bottom of the ocean floor. We, of course, cannot forget Hannibal Schau. Yeah, Ron Perlman's own entry into the kaiju universe. Yeah, and who would have thought that this was sometime after 1000 Ways to Die came to an end. This was another big project of his that he had been a part of since almost day one. But Perlman appearing in Pacific Rim was quite a unique treat, to say the least. In any case, though, the crew embark on their last journey, willing to end the kaiju threat once and for all. And well, it's quite a ride. They head down there to the ocean, investigate the floor, and when the rift does open up, a surprise awaits them. A Category 5 kaiju known as Slattern. Yeah, Slattern is a Category 5 kaiju, and boy was he fast, and quite a big threat. Who would have thought Striker and Gypsy would barely be able to hold out on their own? But then, of course, comes a rather chilling conclusion. Pentecost actually goes in to decimate Striker, a self-destruction ability of some sorts. And when that happens, he wipes them out. Gypsy, of course, is able to survive the blast, and Slattern and the other kaiju involved in the fight are all taken down. So that way Gypsy is able to get down into the rift itself and basically enter the world of the kaiju themselves, all while sustaining quite a bit of damage. But then, of course, the plan goes that they intend on destroying Gypsy as well. The same self-destruction method that Stryker used is also going to have to be used on Gypsy. But before they do so, they initiate self-destruction on Gypsy Danger to ensure that it's capable of destroying the origin of the kaiju invasion once and for all, completely closing the rift, and more so, ending the threat forever. Unfortunately though, while Mako is able to escape via the escape pods, Raleigh somehow has a bit of trouble with his. And well, even though he barely manages to pull the whole thing off and find his own way to escape, Gypsy's explosion, while it is successful in destroying this origin of the kaiju invasion, the creators themselves, whom are able to see Gypsy up close and personal right before the blast. And even though Raleigh gets out alive, it only barely happens. Oxygen is pretty much depleted within the cabin, and he goes unconscious. While he returns to the surface, Mako just sits there, waiting for him. And even though he does resurface, and his body is right inside, it would have taken a miracle to bring him around again because of oxygen depletion that went down. But thankfully, it does work. Raleigh and Mako are officially reunited at the surface of the water, awaiting rescue. And well, that is one heck of a way to end probably one of the best films, and certainly the best thing about 2013. But it unfortunately isn't saying much. But still, I will say that Pacific Rim, looking back on that part and knowing that it had one of the best soundtracks I might have ever heard, as Raymond Djawadi, the same man who had been responsible for Game of Thrones, World of Warcraft, and even Iron Man 2008, which was another film I talked about in Films I'm Willing to Talk About Again. It's no surprise that given the cast, soundtrack, storyline, and many other things in play, Pacific Rim is more than just a masterpiece. Certainly enough to win a number of awards, even though it sadly met little of those requirements necessary to be nominated for such awards. But still, Del Toro pulled it off so well with this one. I feel like it's way better than what he did with Hellboy in comparison. They're both great films by all means, but I'd say Pacific Rim, that was the whole reason why America is now looking to kaiju. And it's also technically the reason why Legendary decided to come through with their own series of movies adapted from various kaiju over the years, such as Godzilla. Soon enough though, we're expected to get Ultraman and Gamera related material as time goes on. I hope they turn out well, just like how Godzilla did. And because Pacific Rim was more or less an original concept, but even then, we could probably expect a lot of things to develop from this point on. And I'm sure there's a lot more to come with Pacific Rim stuff. Because there was, after all, a sequel that came out in 2018, Pacific Rim Uprising, which I actually talked about in Films I Should Have Talked About years ago, Season 1. And I probably wasn't a very good job that I did there, but I'm sure I could do better in the future. Until then, I will have more films that I'm going to talk about again, so stay tuned for more of that stuff, and also like, subscribe, comment, follow me wherever you can find me, and stay on the Hollywood side to see more.
Whatever I want, I usually get, and I'm thinking I want you.